Hi, I'm Ned Steinberger. You're watching for BassPlayersOnly.com.
Hi everyone, John Liebman here. You're watching for BassPlayersOnly.com. We're coming to you today from the NS Design booth at the 2020 NAMM Show, Anaheim, California, with none other than acclaimed instrument maker, legendary Ned Steinberger, and acclaimed author Jim Reilly. You've written, this is your third book already. You did the novel about the bass player. You did a story about Emmett Chapman called Stickman, and this is the brand new book coming out April 15th, 2020, and it is called Steinberger. And it is about Ned and his story and the company and everything else. What inspired you to write this book, Jim?
The story is just such a great story. I guess the first thing with Ned is that he's not a musician. So people think, well, how is this person who's not a musician making these great musical instruments? So you start and you think about that, but then when you start diving into the story and really realize who he is and where he comes from, he's the obvious person to do it because he's looking at it with a fresh eye and creating from a space of real questioning and inquisitiveness that isn't encumbered by that musical preconceived notions. And it's just a great story. It's a story of innovation. It's a story of the music business, starting in the 80s and then moving through now. And again, just a good story from start to finish.
I got an advanced copy and I was reading it on the plane out here. I haven't gotten the whole way through it, but it is fascinating. The part where you were in some kind of co-op with a bunch of other people that were building furniture and cabinets and things like that, and one of the guys in there happened to be Stuart Spector, who was working about 20 or 30 feet away from you, and you saw each other every day. Can you share a little bit about that story, about how you collaborated to come up with the first Steinberger instrument?
Well, I was designing furniture primarily, and also that was my avocation, and I was actually working as a furniture designer, but also to make ends meet, I worked as a cabinet maker, making cabinets for wealthy New Yorkers. But that wasn't that satisfying for me. Stuart, on the other hand, was making musical instruments. Come on, there's nothing as exciting as a musical instrument, whether you can play it or not. And in fact, I think my not being a player was very helpful to me because I came into the whole thing with a kind of a clean slate. I didn't have if you play a guitar since you're 6 years old, you get to love what a guitar has been because that's what you play. So it's a little hard to imagine something else. It almost, to change the instrument goes against the grain. It feels like it's a wrong thing to do because you already know what a guitar is supposed to be, but I didn't really know. I was ignorant. I mean, I knew the guitar had 6 strings, the bass had 4 strings, but I didn't have all these preconceived notions about what it should be, and I wanted to make something above all that was really comfortable. That's how I came into it from the ergonomic standpoint, because I was designing seating, commercial seating, and so it's about aesthetics certainly and about producibility, but at the core it's about, does it fit your body? Is it comfortable? Can you sit in it for a long time? Actually, it's more complicated than that because some of the chairs I designed, they didn't want to be too comfortable because they want to get you in and out of the restaurant. So, but you get to be in touch with how things connect to the body, how a product can work with the human body for benefit of the user. So that's where I came from initially. And initially Stuart gave me all the parameters about what how long the strings needed to be and what kind of pickups to use and the woods that would be most appropriate and that type of thing. So certainly I learned a huge amount from Stuart and was dependent on him for the initial designs, but then I really got into it and started to learn a lot more on my own and work more independently.
Let's talk about that because if I recall correctly, you helped Stuart build a Spector bass, and then you came up with this idea about the headless thing. Again, I think it was for balance reasons or the pivot. So and Stuart wasn't interested in doing a headless. So tell us about that.
Stewart not interested in it. Neither was Ovation. Neither was Music Man. I don't even remember all the different companies that I tried to interest in this design, but nobody was interested. And I talked to dealers about whether to be any market for it, and they all told me I was out of my mind. That musicians were not interested in weird instruments or whatever. But I believed in it. I knew that this bass balanced perfectly. I went through a whole process of learning about the structure of the instrument, how it affects the tone and sustain and so on. So I developed a carbon fiber construction, which was just fabulous. Very difficult at the time because now lots of stuff is carbon fiber, but then carbon fiber was available, very limited amount of availability and very high cost. But I wasn't able to get anybody interested in licensing the design, and finally I think it was Rob Turner of EMG who looked me in the eye and said, "Ned, if you want to see this thing happen, you're going to have to do it yourself." And I said, "Oh no, I don't want to go into business. I mean, that wasn't my aspiration. I'm a designer at heart." But that was what I needed to do. Stewart was just one of many who couldn't see it as a commercially viable prospect.
Yes. Well, obviously, it proved that it works.
The missing piece there is the artists. And once it got in the hands of artists, and Tony Levin was the first Steinberger sale. And once it got into Tony's hands, and the sound, was just explosive and so tight and so present. That was really the piece that got it out there, and that connection to the artist, which again really was the piece that made it go and look past the newness of it to that quality of the sound.
Following on that, I think that musicians could understand what I was doing. They knew that they had neck dive. They knew that the sound was really rich and beautiful. And they understood that the tuner was at the body, it was convenient to use. I mean, there was a logic in the instrument that musicians could understand. Whereas these dealers who said, "You're out of your mind, the musicians don't want weird instruments," that's because a lot of those instruments really made no sense. They were just kind of crazy stuff. But this instrument was not crazy. This was very functional, very to the point, and I could see that gleam in the eye of musicians, and that's what kept me going. So I just decided to bite the bullet, and then I got lucky. I met some great people. I met Hap Kuffner, who here's this guy, total vintage guy. He looks at it, he goes, bass of the future, let's go, And then I met Bob Young. He was a plastics engineer and
he was in the boat industry, wasn't he?
He was in the boat industry, and he was an innovator in plastics, but of course this is reinforced plastic. It's a whole different ball game, and the whole idea of how you can utilize carbon fiber. I went to talk to quite a few different engineers in the reinforced plastic area, and they could only deal with fiberglass. They weren't forward-looking, but I got really lucky. And of course, Bob Young was, at that point, I was 24 years old or something. Bob Young was 60-something years old. Amazing guy, and he said, "Look, let's do this." And we got together and we did it.
So the first Headless Steinberger bass came out around what year?
Well, I made prototypes in 78, I guess, maybe 77, maybe was the earliest. I probably sold that first bass to Tony Levin in 78, probably.
Oh, okay.
But our first production, quote-unquote production, we had made 6 of them, okay, was in 1980. We went to the NAMM show in 1980. Kind of a fun story there because we had our little booth, our 10x10 booth, and we had these, weird-looking plastic basses, and people they were tittering as they went by, laughing, and what is this crazy? And we wanted good money for them.
Who's laughing now?
Well, but then we got this amazingly lucky situation where on Saturday night, the night before the last day of the show, Andy West and the Dixie Dregs took the stage at a big evening event. Those days there was one major event. And Andy just got up there and cranked it up. Oh my God, he's such a great player. And that was a whole new ball game.
What is that?
And the next day, our booth was mobbed and nobody was laughing. So artists are extremely important. And the artists are the folks who made it possible for us to survive, even because, we did gain a good deal of notoriety and appreciation for what we're doing, but that didn't necessarily pay the bills. And I was not a businessman, and it was a very intense struggle to keep this business alive. We started out, we had $36,000. I remember that we were all excited. We raised $36,000. Well, that was gone in about 3 weeks, okay? So it was the artists and MTV that really made it possible for us to survive.
We've barely even scratched the surface of what's in the book. There's so much great stuff about the materials and this whole sequence of accidents and almost, with a wall falling down and this. Well, one thing that I really enjoyed in this book and in the Emmett Chapman book also is how you humanized the subject and talking about Ned's parents and his family and the trip across Canada with his brother. And how did you go about researching all of that? Did you talk to family members?
Yeah, absolutely I did. And again, digging down, talking to the people that were actually there. And gathering their stories and then adding that in there as well. And those are some of my favorites. Talking to your brother was one of my favorite ones. And he's got one of my favorite quotes, Ned's brother, that your designs have a high degree of integrity and a low degree of bullshit. And I love that. I think that's that's one of my favorite quotes in the book.
That's great.
It gets back to the idea that the instrument was strange and alien, but it had integrity. It was the real deal. I think people appreciated that.
What can you share with us now, all these decades later, about the company and the instruments that you're making now and what the future holds for NS Design? What can we look forward that you can share with us now? You probably got some secrets in a lab that you're tinkering, but what can you share with our audience about the future of the company?
What I can share with you is that I believe as much as ever in the concept of a Steinberger bass. I believe there's a tremendous future for it. I sold my company to Gibson in '87 for reasons I think you can deduce from what I was saying earlier. I wasn't a businessman, and I was struggling with the financial aspect and dealing with the bankers and all of that. And when I had the opportunity to sell to Gibson, I was very excited, and I jumped at it and worked with Gibson for a while. But the environment there was not working for me personally, and my original idea with Gibson is that I'd be a lifer. But I guess maybe I'm too independent-minded or whatever. I needed to kind of do my own thing. But I have continued to work with Gibson over the years to support the line. Of course, now is a whole new ball game with new owners at Gibson. They're got a lot on their plate right now, but I am hopeful that we will be able to revitalize the brand. After all, right now, Headless is having a tremendous resurgence of interest, and I think to keep the Steinberger brand in the forefront, we need to develop new products and evolve the line towards the future, and I am hoping we'll be able to do that.
Okay, well, we look forward to whatever you're going to come up with, because we know it's going to be great and it's going to have the integrity and everything else that we talked about. Congratulations on all your success. Good luck with the book. I enjoyed it very much. It's called Steinberger. It will be available. Hal Leonard is the publisher, right? Okay, which owns Hal Leonard. Yes, okay. Anyway, pick it up. It's easy to find. April 15th, 2020. The book is Steinberger. Jim Reilly, congratulations on the book. Ned, congratulations on all your success. Gentlemen, I've enjoyed this. From the NS Design booth at the 2020 NAMM show, Anaheim, California, with Mr. Ned Steinberger, Mr. Jim Reilly. I'm John Liebman. You're watching the #1 site for exclusive one-on-one and sometimes one-on-two bass player interviews, and now more and more people's favorite site for learning bass online. That's ForBassPlayersOnly.com. Once again, I'm John Liebman. Let's play bass.